If you've been thinking about getting serious with your money, like actually serious, now's the time. The Motley Fool is offering new members 50% off their iconic stock recommendation service, Stock Advisor. This is the same service that's crushed the market with recommendations that have returned 1,057% since inception, compared to the S&P 500's 180% over that same period. This isn't guesswork. The Motley Fool has a track record of finding companies before they become household names. So if you want to invest smarter and you like saving money while doing it, go to fool.com/listen to claim your 50% off discount off a 1-year term of Stock Advisor. Again, that's fool.com/listen. Returns of 1,057% are from the Motley Fool's product Stock Advisor and measured against S&P 500 returns of 180% as of July 10th, 2025. Past performance is not an indicator of future results. All investing involves a risk of loss. Individual investment results may vary.
Bugs crashing your pack's party? Whether they've got paws or sneakers, your pack deserves a home that's protected from pests. That's where Wondercide comes in. Plant-powered protection made with steam-distilled natural essential oils that actually work. It kills and repels fleas, ticks, mosquitoes, and ants without questionable ingredients or overpowering smells. Safe to use around kids and pets when used as directed. Lab-proven to work fast. And proudly made in the USA. We offer sprays for pets, people, homes, and yards. Plus, spot-on treatments, collars, and even shampoos. Whatever your pack needs, we've got it covered. Founded by a pet parent looking for a better way to protect her dog Luna, Wondercide's now protected over 21 million lives and counting. You might have even seen us on Shark Tank. Go to Wondercide.com and use code WONDER20 for 20% off your first order. That's WONDER20 at Wondercide.com. Wondercide. Protect your pack with plant-powered Wondercide today.
Welcome to the Kulturecast. I'm Chris Stachiw, and I am joined once again for Jess Byard June by the woman who put the Jess Byard in Jess Byard June, Jess Byard.
Hello.
And we are also joined by a good friend of mine, a good friend of the world, a man of the people, a true connoisseur of films that haven't been seen, Father Malone.
Well, hello.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And on this episode of the Kulturecast for Jess Byard June, we're taking a look at another Ken Russell film. This time, however, we're taking a look at a film that's, well, let's just call it what it is. It's an adaptation of a Bram Stoker novel you've never heard of, but it has a hilarious name. We're talking about The Lair of the White Worm.
Something's been found in Stone Rig Cavern.
Legend has it that Stone Rig Cavern was the lair of the Dampton worm.
My God.
When the venom attacks the nervous system, the victim appears to be afflicted by a form of vampirism.
I hear you're having trouble with a snake.
Ah, and you're going to uphold family tradition and slay the beastie.
Are you out of your mind?
My, you are a fine growing book. Here's to the first swallow.
By Christ, have I a tale to tell you.
I can hardly wait.
So, before we talk about the film, a film that's directed by Ken Russell, written once again by Ken Russell, based on a book by Bram Stoker. Stars Hugh Grant, Amanda Donohoe, Peter Capaldi of all. I want to know, Jess, out of all the Ken Russell movies you could have picked, what motivated you to pick this one?
I mean, you watched the movie. I don't see why you're even asking me that question.
It should explain itself, huh? Well, okay.
To be fair, the Ken Russell doesn't have a huge filmography. We are covering quite a few of his, mainstays here in this month.
He also apparently doesn't have an off switch.
No, he does not.
Which I'm okay with. Let's get this straight.
Here's the thing. I didn't even put Crimes of Passion on this list. Now, I can't speak for what horror is because I have not seen that. But I know what Crimes of Passion is. And compared, I don't know, they all seem pretty on par to me. I don't know why this one shocks you more.
Oh, we'll get to it. For a number of reasons. It doesn't shock. Nothing after watching Litzomania shocks me at this point.
I like that Litzomania is more shocking to you than The Devils is. The ultimate of banned movies.
Yeah, that's true. So, with that in mind, Father Malone, I will kick it to you first. When did you see this film first? And what do you think sitting here watching it for the culture?
I saw this movie in 1988 in the theaters. My first experience with Ken Russell as a filmmaker. And, being a horror kid who had, been fed a steady diet of slasher movies during the 1980s. And then, some of the more classic films, obviously. This one, at the time, I thought was pretty brilliant. And I liked like some of the scares and some of the imagery, really spun my head around. Now I have not seen the movie clearly in some 32 years since then, so it was a little more interesting watching it now, particularly given the cast and some of the shortcuts I think Ken Russell was forced to indulge in here, whereas in his earlier films everything would have been a little more filmic. There's a lot of video effects going on in this, which at the time was unlike anything I had seen in the theater, so I kind of just went with it. I'm a little more critical of the film overall now, but I certainly enjoyed it when I was 15. Mm-hmm. But then what are you gonna do?
Hot snake lady, so.
Yeah, I mean, Amanda Donohoe remains very, very sexy. So, and I certainly thought that at the time, and rewatching it now, like that was probably the best part of the film for me, anyway.
It's up there.
So, Jess, what about you? Watching it for the Kulturecast, did it stand up again?
So I realized when I was watching this that I had not seen.
Hello, this is Chris Haskell from They Live by Film. For those that don't know us, Adam, Zach, and we built a podcast over the last 2 years that's a combination of film discussion from 3 very different perspectives, as well as industry interviews with the leaders in boutique Blu-ray and 4K community. We started with Dev Crocodile, but over time we've been lucky enough to speak with Arrow Video, Severin, Mondo Macabro, Vinegar Syndrome, Radiance, Indicator, most of the OCN partner labels. It's been a blast. You can find us wherever you podcast, and also actually recently as part of Someone's Favorite Production Podcast Network. We hope to see you online.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Lair of the White Worm in a long time. I must have watched it, I don't know, maybe in high school or something, because I didn't remember all of it clearly. obviously, like, we'll get into them. I remembered some of the hallucinations and dreams pretty vividly, but there were kind of the rest of the movie sort of escaped me. Watching it this second time, I can kind of see why that is. This movie's pacing is really interesting in that it does appear to constantly be going, but like moving at a consistent pace, but there's not a lot happening, and I kind of just attribute that to Bram Stoker's story, which I can't say that I have read, but I did read up on it. And it was the last story that he did, and he was well into the end of his life at this point. He was kind of just having these really, like, fever dreams and nightmares and about serpents. So I can't be sure what Bram Stoker died of. But I do know that this story was towards the end of his life and very much influenced by the deterioration of his mind at the time. And I also know that, Ken Russell pretty much rewrote most of this story. It's really just, the fundamentals of it are still there. The idea of this ancient creature, aka the white worm, which we should specify is more of a serpent than a worm. But that's worshipped by vampires. That's the basic gist of the story, and Ken Russell sticks with that. But there's a lot of other, probably more smaller, more in-depth character details and a bit more, history of the time that's missing from this movie, which I don't necessarily know if it would need to be in this movie. I think that this is very much, even if it is adapted, it is still a Ken Russell movie. It has a lot of the hallmarks that, we've already seen in movies like The Devils and Lithomania, and that we'll continue to see as we go along. But it's not my favorite of Ken Russell's movies, but I do enjoy it. And hey, yeah, she's beautiful. Hugh Grant's adorable. Peter Capaldi in A Kills is great.
Peter Capaldi's always great, right?
His accent is wonderful. I am there for all of the hot people in this movie.
I can never see Peter Capaldi in anything other than either The Doctor or as Malcolm Tucker. Malcolm Tucker, I think, is, yes, he's great as the Doctor, but talking about big fucking horse cock is way better than anything he's ever done on the Doctor times 10.
I actually would say that Hugh Grant's probably the worst of the performances in the bunch on this. I don't know. There's something about, and quite honestly, I haven't seen Hugh Grant in much of anything aside from a couple romantic comedies, which he pretty much just ended up being known for in the States.
Paddington 2.
Yeah, oh, sure. I didn't even see Paddington 1.
You should. They're amazing. I'm not even saying any of this
I've heard that they're good. But for me, I don't know, there's the way he talks, everything just seems really, it almost seems like he's putting on an English act, even though he's not, because he's Hugh Grant, he is very much English, but I don't know, there's something about him that seems a bit more embellished in this performance than in others, and it does kind of get on my nerves, but lucky for us, he disappears through half of the movie.
I will say that at least we were able to understand him.
Yes, that's true.
That sort of high northern English accent that most of the actors are engaging in, aside of Capaldi, who's clearly Scottish, there were times where I was like, wait, what? What did they just say?
So I had never seen this film. I hadn't seen any Ken Russell film. And, there's something about this film. There are some things about this film that I did like. There are some things about this film I was not a huge fan of. I think I err more in the side of things I liked outweighing the things I didn't like. There are a lot of pacing problems. I think this film has, and to your point, Jess, it is based off of another piece of fiction. So Ken Russell clearly he may have been beholden to that in some respects. That's fine.
Well, the original, Bram Stoker's Dracula is not, a high action, quick-paced story. It's gothic stories aren't like that. But I did read the chapter on Lair of the White Worm in the book that I mentioned last episode, Phallic Frenzy, the book, the movies of Ken Russell, and take it for what it's worth. Obviously, this book again was written by one of his good friends who worked with him very closely on set. So some of these stories and all that might be embellished a bit, but he does reference the pacing in this movie and says that, according to Ken Russell was trying to emulate like the movement of a snake right before it jabs you in its pacing. Take that for what you will, but that's what the book says.
I will take that. I will take that, but that did not come across on screen. Maybe that story is just a big crock.
Perhaps.
I don't know. I mean, like y'all have said, I mean, you guys pretty much covered already the initial thoughts. I mean, Hugh Grant's okay. Peter Capaldi's great. I think Catherine Oxenberg and Sammy Davis are given nothing to do other than act scared or scream.
And be damsels.
Amanda Donohoe is great. I think the biggest bummer about this movie is who they supposedly initially wanted for the role. Which is? It was Tilda Swinton.
That would have been awesome, but not as. I mean, okay, it would have been two different. That's a different.
It would have been a completely different movie.
Yeah, because what we're getting with Amanda Donohoe is, like we've already said, like she's sexy snake lady. She's really putting that on. But I think with Tilda, she's wearing thigh-high leather boots and all of these revealing clothing, but I think with Tilda Swinton, we would have gotten something a bit more serpent-like, which, hey, I'm not saying that wouldn't have made the movie better, but, this movie's also supposed to be sort of a horror comedy, so I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Ken Russell claimed that it was a comedy. So he claims. He said that you're supposed to laugh along with the film, and apparently the audience didn't get the joke, and he actively wanted the audience to laugh along with the film. Bullshit of the highest order. There's no way.
I don't know. I do believe that he was absolutely making this as more of a farce and more of a fun thing, but I think that the thing that just doesn't translate well, especially for American audiences, is there's a lot of specific, this movie's very, very English. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies that are just very British, and I don't think that, especially in 1988, like to your point, Father Malone, as, the smorgasbord of horror movies you were getting at the time were pretty straightforward slasher movies. So having this sort of, somewhat vampiric tale that's super heightened in its sexuality and then this weird ass pacing, I can see how, especially with Ken Russell being the way he is and having the kind of humor he does, it just not translating well. And I think that partly, where this movie does fall short is not necessarily in Ken Russell's directing. It is just maybe the story itself is something that doesn't lend itself well to Ken Russell's vision.
I had read the same quote by Ken Russell saying that, I really wanted everyone to enjoy this as a comedy. And I had read that before I was watching the movie. And for about 3/4 of the way through the film, I was like, yeah, do you? Really? You did want this to be a comedy? But when we got Peter Capaldi sort of hypnotizing a cop with his bagpipes, and they're doing this weirdo backwards dance together where he's keeping him at bay, all right, I actually laughed out loud during that scene. And I know that Hugh Grant himself said, he didn't know what it was supposed to be either, and he just kept laughing in the theater and then feeling guilty that he was laughing. So...
And he's also apparently embarrassed by this film.
Well...
He has other things to be embarrassed by.
Yeah, like that mugshot.
Sure.
Hey, man!
Divine Brown. Him saying it sort of... Ken Russell saying it after the fact, it reminded me a little bit of, Joe Esterhaus saying, oh, we totally intended Showgirls to be a comedy.
Or Tommy Wiseau with The Room. It was a comedy all along.
I was in on the joke. Like, I don't know that you were. Like, clearly, Ken Russell's sense of humor is a very dry and absurdist one, and I do think that comes through on occasion, but it's not like American Werewolf in London, where it's like, I'm laughing and then I'm terrified and then back again.
It's funny you bring that up because I have in my notes that I have this as sort of Ken Russell's version of like a Wicker Man meets Werewolf in London.
Yeah, I'd buy that. That's a pretty good description.
Where we just have this weird town where everybody's kind of in on the local legend of the White Worm, which, you know, if you haven't watched the movie and you're listening to this, the general gist is that Peter Capaldi is an archaeologist who, while he's excavating, finds the skull of this legendary white worm creature that's basically this mythical serpent. And by finding this skull, he fucks up and awakens it. And Amanda Donohoe, who's, I guess, like does she run the town? Does she own the town? Because everybody seems to know who she is and knows.
I think she's just a town local.
Or she's like town royalty. Like she's a rich lady in the...
So the Lambton worm is like a known thing, obviously, if Bram Stoker was writing about it. I mean, on our other show, Scary Stories We Tell, we could literally have made an episode about this thing. I mean, it's kind of it's folklore-ish cryptid. Right. But I didn't understand any of that in the movie when it came to her character, because her character just kind of, like you said, just kind of shows up.
Yeah, she comes back. She's evidently on holiday somewhere or just gone. And, I get this reading after the fact and knowing that it's Bram Stoker and knowing that she's sort of this vampire figure. You know, it's reason to believe that she has just been asleep for however long, or maybe she was out on holiday. I mean, like we see Dracula traveling in other stories. So, yeah, they don't go into specifics on, like, I guess there's a lot of exposition, but it's still all very convoluted.
If there's exposition, it's not very good either. On top of being convoluted, it's just not anything. It's not anything particularly exciting.
Right,
no,
because we don't know why.
It's just two characters standing together talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In front of a bowl
I do like
pickled worms.
Mm-hmm. Pickled
yeah,
worms.
no, but that whole sequence when they've sort of the entire town has gathered at the manor hall and that's part of this celebration. Like, that puppet that comes shambling into the room is pretty amazing.
Oh yeah.
I liked that whole sequence a lot, and I thought, like, that's how you do exposition. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have a band singing about it, and then you have everyone participating in it. Whereas, like earlier, we've gotten Peter Capaldi standing there with I forget her name now.
Sammy Davis.
Yeah, Sammy Davis, where they're just like talking back and forth, and it's like the most dry, kind of boring thing. Like, really? This is... Can you at least give us a close-up here or something? It's just... I don't know.
Change an angle, please.
Yeah, something, man. Zoom in.
I was really disappointed by the lack of visually interesting stuff going on in this movie.
Yeah, because he's nothing if not well known for being a visual stylist.
Oh, God, yeah. And I'm wondering how much of that, like, you said earlier, Chris, that, Bram Stoker's writing, I don't, believe ever was... I mean, when I read Dracula years ago, I don't remember it being super, super in-depth detail, and I think that maybe that kind of, like I said, I just don't feel like this story specifically, and Bram Stoker especially, just the kind of, his style and his energy just does not lend itself well to a Ken Russell.
Here's the issue with that reasoning, though. This story doesn't take place in the time and place that the original story takes place. It's transplanted into the 20th century.
Right.
And Ken Russell's film that we just watched, Litztomania, is about a character from the 19th century. His character, the film Litztomania, is about a real-life person from the 19th century. And that film is completely full of interesting, visually exciting stuff. It feels like Ken Russell phoned it in. It really does. Having seen The Devils in Litztomania, which were visually interesting, completely over the top in a way that's enjoyable, this film has those moments, but it never even comes close to The Devils or Litztomania. And I was surprised by that.
And I want to know how much of that is, because then I guess I can figure this out real quick, who released this movie. Like, what? Oh, it was Vestron Video, right?
Vestron, yeah.
Yeah. Which you would think that Vestron would be a company that would let Ken Russell pretty much run wild. That's not a studio that I would think would be, like, you know, tampering too much in, you know, keeping things toned down.
Well, it's my understanding that this was sort of a one for you, one for me situation, where he was trying to get either the women or the rainbow made,
I think.
and then they agreed to let this for him to get that movie, but he had to do a horror movie for them first because that's where it's at. So I wonder sometimes, and I think the video usage, the sort of video effects that they went into, I'm wondering how much there was a budgetary restriction on Ken Russell for this movie. So
that's what I'm wondering.
I mean, it's still a little more dynamic than most horror movies we were getting at the time, certainly. But I mean, when you stack it up against his earlier achievements, it feels kind of pedestrian in that way.
Yeah, it really does. And again, having come from Litzomania on the last episode, where that film is just full of things to look at in every scene, be it a 10-foot dick, the room with butts hanging off the walls, farting out, like, sleeping gas. Like, there's a ton of stuff in that movie going on. And I expected, when I sat down to watch this, that it was going to follow that same track. And maybe that's my own fault for those expectations, but the last two Ken Russell films I watched followed that same track, so I guess it's not unfair to assume that it was going to be like that.
Right. I would say that the first two that you watched are probably up there in that his most, like, bombastic of movies, but I can see that, you know, maybe budgetary restrictions being an issue of not being able to get that, like, kind of visual style that we're so used to seeing. And I do, you know, I can also see it being a sort of a bit of a phone in, like you said, Chris, if it was like this, a one for me, one for you, because I know that The Rainbow is the film that he made after this, which was the one that he definitely wanted to make that over this.
And that's too bad, because there is a interesting, exciting film in here. There really is. I don't think that this film is bad. I just, honestly, it's not that I think the film is boring. I just find the film a little pedestrian for what it is.
Yeah, you know, when I first saw the movie, like I said, like, I had not been privy to the rest of his filmography, so this to me was dynamic as hell. And now watching it however many years later, having now been fed a steady diet of what Ken Russell is capable of, it does feel pedestrian. It does feel kind of phoned in a little bit. So I don't know. I think at the time it certainly wowed me, but that's you know, retrospectively now, it's not his best work.
I would agree with that. And I would agree that, like, the main scene that I remember is more the end, where it's Peter Capaldi with the bagpipe hypnotizing the cop.
Which is great.
That's always the scene that sticks out in my mind, and that's probably because it's one of the most Ken Russell-y of scenes.
Oh, it totally is.
Yeah, and you know, every scene Amanda Donohoe is in is pretty dynamic. Like, you know, it's funny because
Jess.
What?
Yeah. I'm with you.
No, she is the best part of the film.
If you say any part in any film, their original choice was Tilda Swinton, my reaction is going to be, oh, they should have done that, because she's just so interesting as a performer. However, I do think, you know, whatever serpenty kind of thing she would have indulged in, it does not equal what Amanda Donohoe did. So we certainly weren't going to get the sort of sex pot character, which is what this movie needs, because everything else is kind of yeah, it's kind of dry other than that. I mean, and we get a few scares here and there, and there's some interesting visuals now and again, but, you know, her drowning that guy with her leather boot while she's standing there, I don't know, that was pretty great. That whole sequence, as a matter of fact, I thought was pretty dynamic.
I just wish that he had kept that kind of pace and tone through the film.
Well, and she's the funniest part, because you know, in that same scene where she's going off on this big tirade and then the doorbell rings and it's just shit.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of that. And yeah, I wish I would have liked to see more of her and less
Who the hell wouldn't?
And less of the, kind of dry, we're just standing here talking. And I mean, that kind of goes to Ken Russell's sort of theater background in, the movies are all about action, right? Movies are supposed to be about action and moving the plot forward and all of that. Theater, you can kind of get away with some more talky elements because it's generally more of like an introspective look at whatever topic you're discussing. And I think that kind of comes out here, where there's a lot of those we're just sitting here having these talky scenes. But in a movie, and especially a Ken Russell movie, that does just slow the movie down to an absolute crawl.
But then you get moments like her spitting venom on Jesus,
which was great. And then we haven't talked about the hallucinations yet, but the most Ken Russell aspects of this movie are the various fever dreams that are induced by I guess we'll just call her the Serpent Queen. I don't know.
Serpent Mama.
Serpent Mama, yeah.
I mean, again, like, there are those little moments, like the weird scenes with the cross and the worm and like a snake draped over Jesus at one point. Like, that is just like, that just smacks of Ken Russell.
Well, that smacks very much of the devils, like those sequences in general, with the nuns and lots of phallic imagery.
Having nuns being raped by centurions, like, well, that's Ken Russell all over.
Absolutely.
And then you're brought back down to earth to, the Derbyshire countryside, where it's just like, okay. I mean, that's the problem with a film like this, is when you do things like those scenes, you almost want more of that and less of what you got. And that's just kind of always the way it is when you've got these over-the-top bombastic scenes, and then in between them is just kind of ho-hum generic characters. And
very
some of them
dry.
And some of the characters are so unforgettable, I didn't even know what their names were. Like Eve and Mary Trent.
And the thing is with them is their whole... So the other side plot is that their sisters and their mom and dad disappeared, I guess. And it turns out they were eaten by the worm because it is living near their home in this really awesome cave, which the locations in this movie, of course, because it's English countryside, are beautiful. And I would love to actually go to where they filmed, where the Lair is. But yeah,
that cave is magnificent.
We didn't get to know much more about, like, we don't know why her parents were taken by the worm, or why, if they were even, like, aware of it, what they may have been doing. And then it doesn't really matter because, like we said, these two women really only exist to be kind of damsels for Peter Capaldi to end up saving, and, we get the generic ending. But
how about that extended Hugh Grant fever dream in a plane? Boy, that went on and on.
Boy, didn't it?
At times, that movie, that point in the movie, and the very, beginning with just kind of the atmospheric droning music and the slow push-in, there were little moments of David Lynch in this movie. And that plane scene kind of, that had a bit of that for me in there.
There came a point during that sequence where I thought, oh, I guess this is the movie now.
I thought it was for a minute.
We are never leaving this plane.
My favorite part of the movie was the seemingly tacked on twist ending.
Wow. He had to leave everything open for a sequel then, right?
Yeah, a sequel that never happened.
People were clamoring, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, they were not.
To see Peter Capaldi bring back his bagpipes.
So the way the film ends is Peter Capaldi thinks that he has the antidote for being bitten by Snake Mama, Serpent Mama. And it turns out that, I guess, at the clinic, they switched what they gave him. And so they gave him an arthritis drug. And then the film essentially ends with him and Hugh Grant in a car together. And Peter Capaldi, lifts his, pant up to show that he has a snake bite. Kilt. And then it's like, dun, dun, dun. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's super lame.
You need that at the end of a horror movie.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean Cunningham.
Well, I mean, and maybe I missed something, but at the end when he was talking to the person at the hospital, is that Amanda Donohoe that he's talking to? Because for a minute I thought that was her, and she was kind of insinuating like, oh, I switched it on purpose, but then I was like, that can't be right because she's dead. I thought.
Yeah.
I don't think it was, but I wouldn't put it past this film to do something that stupid. I mean, the problem is, like, what it honestly feels like is two movies, doesn't it? It kind of feels like two movies in one.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah, there's kind of a dry investigation going on where Peter Capaldi and Hugh Grant are trying to figure out this murder mystery in a way, and then there's also a snake woman worshipping a god.
That's the movie I want to see countryside. More of.
Yeah, it's funny to me that Ken Russell didn't just go whole hog and have this be Amanda Donohoe's movie from the get-go. Like, and all the other characters are just sort of peripheral and coming in on her. Like, that would have been a more bold choice, I think. But, I think, as you said, Jess, he was sort of beholden to the novel, and I think, he wrote a draft of Dracula, that a screenplay that never got made. So clearly that was of interest to him to get Stoker's ideas out there. So I don't think he wanted to deviate that wildly. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah, certainly. And Gothic, that's a much better movie.
Well, and that's the weird thing about it is, Dan Ireland, who was the executive, who was the admirer of Ken Russell, was told by Vestron that if Ken Russell could come up with a horror movie, they would produce it. And I just find it weird that the guy who's an admirer of Ken Russell didn't take Ken Russell to task with the movie and be like, come up with something crazier than this. Because in your movie about Franz Liszt, he's riding a 10-foot dick. And in this movie, the only time we see anything interesting are in minor dream sequences or at the very end. And even then, it's from a perspective that really doesn't show off how probably impressive that giant puppet was.
Right.
If it was giant at all, which it may not have been for the sole purpose of, the budget.
Well, I'm sure when they were getting the dailies back and they saw Amanda Donohoe in the blue makeup with the fangs rocking a giant deadly phallus, they were like, yeah, this is it. This is Ken Russell, all right.
Yep, that's pretty much his hallmark that shows up in almost every movie.
Yeah,
money well spent. High fives all around.
Money well spent on Amanda Donohoe and her giant snake strap-on.
What was the budget on this movie?
$2 million.
$2 million. That's not a lot of money.
It made less than $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Made that where, though? Here or just in general?
In the U.S.
Oh, well.
No accounting for our taste, so.
Cumulative worldwide was $1,189,315.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So that
but he got to make the rainbow.
Wikipedia is it's cumulative, not just through the U.S. So.
I mean, he made more movies after this, so.
Oh yeah.
It was not a career ender.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about a film like this, right? If this was his first film that he had ever made, you never would have heard of it.
Well, we might have, but.
but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, if this is your first film out of the gate, you have a higher likelihood of it ending your career. But he already has The Devil.
I don't know.
He already has Altered State. He already has Tommy. Like, he already has all these films that are iconic.
I think you're more likely to fuck up your career if you have all those good things and then you go, whoops, here's something really lame.
I agree with that. I think if this were in 1988, the debut of a new filmmaker, then people would at least go, well, that was interesting. Let's see what he does next.
Mm-hmm. The one he did like another movie that year, Salome's Last Dance, that is another one that I really like. And that definitely falls more into, because it is a play, it's a play within a movie, and it's all very theatrical, and it leans very much into Oscar Wilde and that kind of just era of writers. And I think that this movie, because we do get that quote from Amanda Donohoe from, The Importance of Being Earnest, where it's like, losing one parent is bad enough, but losing two just appears careless. or something like
that's
that.
A great line.
And yeah, I mean, but I love Oscar Wilde, and I love seeing those little bits where I do feel like Vestron probably did have, a handhold on the purse strings, which really, I think, probably limited Ken Russell and probably stifled some of his creativity. Because, again, in the dream sequences, in that line of, from importance of being earnest, and just like these little tiny ways, you see him and what he can do pop out. And, I think that this was just a confluence of other things that kind of tampered that down. And this is going, into the later part of his career. He's getting older at this point. Gothic was right before this one. I think, the only one that we're going to check out that came after this is horror.
Yep, that's right. I mean, look, I actually disagree, Father Malone, with your kind of... I look at it the other way, because I would compare it to someone like Spielberg, right? I mean, Steven Spielberg made one of his most iconic films right at the beginning of his career, Jaws. And then he would
but he made Sugarland Express before that, which is not exactly setting the box office on fire.
And Duel, but that movie's doo-doo.
Sure.
You were fighting with me last night. You're not gonna fight with me tonight?
Nope.
I took all the piss out of you last night.
Can't argue with crazy.
I can't. Well, if I'm crazy, then so is Jess, because neither
of
us
that's
liked
true.
it.
But I have seen Duel more times than you.
Oh, congratulations. You've wasted more of your time on it than I have.
Yes, I did.
I don't know, it's odd to me. And again, like you said, Jess, we'll be watching horror here pretty quick. But if horror is in the same vein as this, where it feels like two different movies, that's kind of unfortunate. Really
I'm interested to see what horror's going to be like, because I just know that it's his response to Pretty Woman, and I also have already seen Crimes of Passion. So if it's anything like that, I am on board.
Get on board then.
Fuck yeah.
I will say that earlier scene I mentioned where the sort of townsfolk have come together for the celebration, I did, however glacially the film was paced after that, I liked that it effectively set up the entire climax of the movie. Like, in pantomime form, they were showing us pretty much exactly where the rest of the movie went to, and I thought that was clever. And then, but that's Ken Russell, I would expect nothing less.
Well, and I like that song.
Oh my God, that song.
The song.
Yeesh.
The song about the Lambton worm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wish I could use it on this podcast without probably getting some sort of YouTube takedown, because look, as a content creator, you can't use other people's stuff without their permission.
Right.
At least unless you want your shit to be taken and wholesale trash canned. But yeah, the song in the movie is great. I mean, I think that scene at the beginning of the film, that kind of the party scene, is really interesting for the most part until you get to the point where Capaldi and Hugh Grant are just talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess a lot of my feelings on this movie are it's personal feelings, because I just expected more, I guess. And that's on me. I fully accept that I was expecting more, and I shouldn't be disappointed because my expectations weren't fulfilled. But at the same time, how could I not have had the expectations I had when Litzomania and The Devils were so visually interesting to begin with?
Right. Hey, you picked the order.
and Jess, right in my face, just boom. You're right, because if this had been first, I would have been like, I don't think that this movie in a vacuum is good either.
I think that, I don't know. I mean, at the time, I definitely appreciate it for what it was doing at the time, because it was 1988, and as we've discussed before, the brand of horror movie that was coming out was cheap slasher after slasher, and while I love those, I do enjoy the, foray into these weird supernatural, weird folklore stories that we got out of the 70s and 80s. And, I mean, especially so late 80s, too. Like, this is this is nearing this is 1988, getting pretty close to the 90s, where we wouldn't see any movies like this really about this kind of subject matter for a long time. At least not.
That's true. Horror was in
its
last gasp at this point.
Yeah. So
for a while.
I don't know. I think I don't see as bombastic and as crazy and visually rich as Ken Russell's style is. And while he has movies like The Devils and, Altered States, and for all intents and purposes, this movie, I don't see him as a horror guy.
No.
He's definitely, it's much more of the theatrical, and I mean, you learn that just by looking at his subjects. The people that he made most of his movies about were, composers and artists, and he comes from a very different background and a very different approach to these art forms and the art form of filmmaking. So him jumping into something that's so, at that point in 1988, and even trying to do, something different, I applaud it for that. And I do, I've watched a lot of trash. This is by far not the worst or most boring attempt at a horror movie I've seen.
It has its moments. They're few and far between, but I wouldn't throw the entire film out. It's not the most entertaining film I've seen in the last 6 months. But
if you chopped 10 to 15 minutes out of the middle, I think we'd be good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It goes on a little too long.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny considering how it's only 93 minutes.
Get close.
I know, but it needed more focus.
And you want to get back to Amanda Donohoe quickly because she's what the movie's about. She's the most, interesting talent in the movie as well, but her story is what the movie is about. It's what Peter Capaldi and Hugh Grant are trying to figure out. So we spend we'll meander until it's, feels like it's been eons since we saw her. And it just, as we've said, the pacing it dies in the middle.
Yeah, I just keep thinking, when are we getting back to her? Are we really going to watch these two guys talk some more? Jesus
right.
Christ. They're figuring out something that we, at the audience, already know now,
mm-hmm.
because we've met the villain. So them sort of putting the mystery together, it's like, yeah, we're way ahead of you, man.
It's less fun when you as the audience know that. There's certain time and place where it's fun for the audience to have privileged information that the character doesn't have. But when it's something as basic as this exposition, it's like, all right, okay. Now, there is also the very thin underlying sort of almost romantic relationship, or at least romantic connection between Peter Capaldi and Hugh Grant's character. And that is something more that I was reading more in the book about this, and that's more of a Ken Russell imprint than a Bram Stoker imprint. And I think that he might have been trying to, if he was trying to get, because the purpose, for all intents and purposes, she can mind control people, right? That's her whole deal. And she kind of, gets Hugh Grant in with her at one point.
That's true. I thought that was weird that she just kind of lets him go. Okay, nice to meet you. I'll see you later.
It's now you're not that interesting. Never mind.
Yeah, maybe that was it. Yeah.
I mean, would the film have been better if Hugh Grant and Peter Capaldi had just kissed at the end?
Yes.
Probably, yeah.
So much sexual tension in that final scene.
And the person who was supposed to also be joining on this podcast this evening but could not make it would also agree with that statement. Yes.
I think I would agree with that statement as well. Hey, I'll whatever.
Now kiss.
So, Father Malone, what would you give the film out of 5? How many white worms would you give the film?
I'd give it 2.5 white worms. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It's just sort of right in the middle. I didn't feel like I wasted my time, but I wasn't energized by what I ended up seeing.
What about you, Jess?
I am also going to give it 2.5 white worms.
Yeah, I'm going to give it 2.5 as well. I think, to your point, Father Malone, I didn't feel like I wasted my time, but I'm also not going to, tell my friends to go watch this.
Right.
I definitely told people I know who like film, who had never seen The Devils, go watch The Devils when I was done watching The Devil.
Of course. Well, that's a superior film.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell anyone to watch this. And again, even though it has Hugh Grant and Peter Capaldi, which looking back on it now, it's kind of insane, given their career trajectories.
Right.
Yeah,
But
I think if I was talking to a Doctor Who fan, I might recommend the movie because they get to see him in all of his unlined, floppy-haired glory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then just tell him to watch the fucking film where he plays Malcolm Tucker.
Yeah, but then
they'll really be like, who is this again? This is the Doctor? Yeah. Man. Yeah. Peter Capaldi is such an interesting actor, and he has had a very interesting career for sure. So, well, let's take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Kulturecast.
Do you think what I do is wrong?
Have you ever wondered? What's your name?
Liz, you want a date?
What it would be like?
I know what they want.
Maybe it's time you found out.
Let me be your fantasy.
Teresa Russell.
I used to love sex. Let me be your fantasy.
In a Ken Russell film.
Let me be your fantasy.
If you're afraid to say it, just see it.
See you in church, honey.
That's right. On the next Kulturecast, we're going to be taking a look at Ken Russell's film Whore, which was his answer to Pretty Woman. I'm assuming you haven't seen it, Jess, right?
Nope. It's the
Neither
only one
have
that I for sure had not seen.
No, I haven't seen it either, so it's going to be exciting. And I believe it's just going to be you and I on that one.
All right.
So it'll just be a viewing of a film neither of us have seen, and hopefully it's good, and if not, no blame. We did an entire month of essentially just bad movies with sexploitation films. So, until then, where can people find you, Father Malone?
Check me out over on my YouTube channel, OughtFiveFilms, OughtFiveFilms. A lot of content there for you. And you can also hear me on two other podcasts, Chronicles from the Crypt, about the HBO television series Tales from the Crypt, and Dreams for Sale, the Twilight Zone 85 podcast, the only decent reboot of the Twilight Zone to date.
What about you, Jess? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at writer Jess Byard, and you can find me on a myriad of other podcasts. You can find Chris and I together on our show, The One Season Show, where we talk about television that lasted only one season. You can find us both on our other podcast, Scary Stories We Tell, where we investigate stories of true crime and the unexplained.
And as for me, you can find me on Twitter, and that's pretty much it. And here, obviously, in all those podcasts that these fine folks already mentioned. I also do a Barney Miller podcast with our good friend Mike White. Kulturecast.com is where you can find the episode. Kulturecast is also on Patreon, patreon.com/Kulturecast. We're on iTunes and Google Play. Give us a good review there. Every little bit helps get us one step closer to finally being on the Apple iTunes podcast front page for the first time in 6 years. I don't know if that's actually a thing or how you get there and if it matters. But hey, if you give us a review, that could happen, I guess. Big thanks to Jess and Father Malone for joining me and talking about this movie. And catch you on the next episode.